right, everyone, it is so nice to be here today. This is a big topic, and I'm so excited to have a chance to talk about it a little bit more. I feel like this is a term we just drop people pleasing around, and we don't think about deeper what it could mean. So today I want to talk about what people pleasing is and how to move towards more personal empowerment. This is one of my favorite quotes. When you say yes to others, make sure that you are not saying no to yourself. Carissa did such a great job with my bio. I'll just put this up here with my contact information. This will be also provided to you in the workbook if it feels aligned, or invite you to look at that closer. The way I got really interested in talking about boundaries, people pleasing, and actually burnout is because I was working with a lot of leaders and coaching professionals who were on the brink of complete burnout and their careers ending essentially due to that. And exploring further, it turned out that so many professionals struggled with boundaries and people pleasing, and it was something that led into the actual result of potential burnout. Now, for this presentation, I invite you to please put comments if you have questions, or if you want to challenge me on something, or you want to just kind of make a point, additional point. Please do so. This is meant to be more of an engaged, interactive session today. Today, what we'll look at is, first, we'll look at a definition of people pleasing. And we'll look at what people pleasing is and what people pleasing is not. We will look at people pleasing at work specifically, because I think there is a different flavor to it at work. Then I'm going to introduce you to the people pleasing cycle, to start to invite you to look at your own people pleasing cycle and how you experience it if you identified as a people pleaser. And we'll talk about a couple ways to start to break that cycle. So, first of all, I want to know in the comments, how do you define people pleasing? Love to know from a few of you. Just give a moment to type out. How do you define people pleasing for yourself?
Someone said, perhaps trying to satisfy everyone, saying yes too quickly, never wanting to disappoint, feeling like you need to make people happy. Yeah, putting people's
Wow.
happiness before your own.
Oh, okay. Well, we're all on the same page. Absolutely. That I see so many comments coming in. Absolutely. So the way we have it defined here is that it's a behavioral pattern where someone prioritizes other people's approval, comfort, and or expectations at the expense of their own needs, values, or well-being. So that is something that is really needs to be highlighted. It's at the expense of yourself. This is a habit. It's a habit that we react to. It's a habit that we kind of can't get out of, where we abandon ourselves. I'll speak about myself, because as a recovering people pleaser, I remember, especially when I first entered the workforce, this is something I did not know how to get out of, but I would abandon myself as a strategy to avoid conflict, rejection, or disapproval. It was terrifying to consider that someone might not be happy with me. As you can imagine, and you may have already experienced for yourself, that this is a habit that can help you slide into resentment, burnout, and deep inauthenticity. And when you're inauthentic in your career, and I don't mean transparent, but I mean when you're completely not able to connect with who you are, this is where we see deep unsatisfaction and non-fulfillment in career and in your personal life. So in that, I'm so curious to know, actually, let's not do it in a scale of 1 to 10. But I want to know, do you identify yourself as a people pleaser based on that definition? Forget the scale of 1 to 10, just yes or no.
Lots of yeses in the chats. I don't think I even see a single no.
Okay. All right. So you've come here because feels like a topic that's close to your heart. All right. Let's let's talk about what people pleasing is not for a moment, just so that we are all on the same page. So people pleasing is not doing what is expected in your role. As someone who is employed, you have certain responsibilities you have agreed to within your job scope, and coming to work and saying, this one doesn't feel like I want to do, this is not something I feel like doing today, and refusing to do that is not necessarily avoiding people pleasing. It's actually might be insubordination. So that is not, when we're talking about people pleasing, that's not what we're talking about. We're actually not talking about the occasional compromise that you might make in order to help a decision go through, or to make sure the group does something that is right for the group, but you might disagree with. It's not authentic kindness. And I will go into this a little bit deeper in the next slide. But if you are, I know when I've worked with people who identified as people pleasers, they felt like either they're people pleasing or they're unkind. And I want to say that there is so much space for authentic, deep kindness without people pleasing and without that toxic concaving that we might do as people pleasers. And it's not healthy flexibility. So if you are able to be flexible within your role, within certain decisions, or taking certain things on, and it feels healthy for you, that's not necessarily people pleasing. I want to introduce you to this concept too that I've put together, that people pleasing is actually more of a spectrum than I am a people pleaser or I'm not a people pleaser. And so I'm going to define how I see the spectrum, and I want to know in the comments where you see yourself at the end, where you see yourself on the spectrum. So let's start on the healthy accommodation side. Now, healthy accommodation means that you have the skill, the ability to actually put your own needs back in order to accommodate a group or another person or a situation when necessary. So that's actually a skill. And I'm going to say this is a skill because I bet you know someone who doesn't have the skill, who is not able to put themselves back and will fight tooth and nail for the smallest things because they're not able to accommodate. And this is actually a very healthy and good skill to have when you are part of a community, part of a team, or in a relationship with another human being. In the healthy accommodation, this is where when you are accommodating, it's actually more of a decision, though. It's not a reaction. It's not that like that reactive piece that we talked about in the definition of people pleasing, but a strategic decision that you make when you see that it's a better moment. So, like I said in the previous slide, let's say that you are part of a team discussion. The team is going forward with a decision you might not fully agree with. You've made your voice known, you've made your opinions known. The team is still moving forward in that way, and you're able to say, okay, I will accommodate and I will support my team because I see that that is the best for the team, and you're able to do that. I believe also that this is where healthy kindness, authentic kindness really lives. And this is where that kindness can come when you can be kind towards someone where it doesn't necessarily have a deep cost to you. And where you're able to also provide kindness in a different way. For example, there's situations where maybe kindness looks not like me doing something for someone, but teaching them or coaching them to do something for themselves, even though I could quickly do it for them. Maybe it's a healthy challenging, knowing I know you can do this. I know you can do better than this. That can be a truer kindness. This is in healthy accommodation. This is where I can let go of the control of how someone feels about me, that I can live with the uncertainty that someone might not like me. That's huge. I don't know if I've fully mastered this part, but I do have to say that as I've a recovering people pleaser, that I'm able to move closer and closer to this spectrum in most situations. All right, so let's jump to the opposite, the red part here. This is where we're looking at that extreme definition that we saw in a few slides back. This is where we experience that full self-abandonment in order to satisfy other people. We might have no sense of self, or we might not even be sure of what it is we want to do or we want for ourselves because we're so used to deferring to other people. We might have no sense of what success looks like for us. This is where we have such a low tolerance for the idea that other people might not like us or might reject us, that we react and make sure we are nice and just pacify every moment, so that there's lowers the risk of someone having maybe even a slight annoyance with us. Now let's look at the middle here. In the middle, I believe, and I'd love to know if there's something else you see for yourself, but in the middle, I believe that this is where you, someone in this area would actually have areas in their own life where they are able to have healthy accommodation, where they are have a sense of self, where they are able to stick up for themselves. However, there may be one or two places or people where they start to veer more into that people-pleasing mode, where they have that bit of a more of insecurity. I know for me, work was a big one where I had healthy friendships, healthy family relationships, but work, I was already nudging in this direction where I had that people-pleasing tendency. So when I explain it that way, I'd love to know in the chat if you could name a color: purple, blue, green, yellow, orange, or red. Where do you see yourself on this spectrum if you had to place yourself? I'm seeing a few comments coming through.
We got a lot of yellows and oranges.
Great. Well, not great. Great that you're responding.
Some teals, some greens,
Nice.
yellow,
Great.
greenish.
Greenish. I know this area can be kind of
Yeah, they got like a yellow
wonderful.
orange, yellow green.
Wonderful. I love hearing that there is that differentiation here. Yes, yellow and orange. This is where we're going to be hanging out for the rest of the presentation, and moving forward. All right, thank you. All right, so now that we have this definition down, we have the spectrum down, let's look a little bit about what the people pleaser, and we're going to talk about the people pleaser in the closer to that orange red zone, just for ease and definition, and only because we have this 1 hour together. And we're going to look at what people pleasers think and how they evaluate situations. Now, I just want to say, I will give you this information in a moment, but this is based on Dr. Harriet B. Breaker's book, The Disease to Please, where she shares actually 10 commandments that people pleasers have for their own to rule themselves. And this is pulled from that. I'll share the book in the next slide. So a people pleaser, whether they realize it or not, believe that so as a people pleaser, I believe I should always do what other people expect, want, or need from me. As a people pleaser, I believe I should always take care of everyone around me, whether they ask me to or not. As a people pleaser, I believe I should always be happy and upbeat. As a people pleaser, I believe I should always listen to everyone's problems and try to solve them. As a people pleaser, I believe I should never burden anyone else with my problems or my needs. And as a people pleaser, I should always put other people and their needs first and ahead of me. Now, Dr. Breaker in her book says there's a bonus one, and the bonus one is that I should always fulfill these expectations of myself completely and perfectly. Here's I'm just going to go back here. Here's the book. So take a screenshot of that if you like, or note it down. It's a fantastic read if the topic feels close to your heart. But I want to ask you in the comments, firstly, name a number of how many of these sound like something you didn't realize you might be thinking. So we have 6 of them. So name 6, 5, 4, 3, 0. How many of these feel close to you to how you think?
I got 3, lots of
Mm,
6s coming through, most of all
wow.
of them.
All
4,
right.
6. Yeah, good. I want to say mostly in between the range of 3 to 6. So
3 to 6. Okay. All right. So we are very much, like you said, in the spectrum. Most of you put yourself in that space. So if you were closer to that purple or blue space, you might have 1 or 0 of these. And the real kind of 2 words to that are the trigger here is the always and the should. That, I can do what people expect of me, but not I always have to. Now, I want to ask you just to think for yourself, how realistic are these expectations? How realistic are these? Now, let's be honest, they're not realistic. There's no way I can always do what other people expect, want, or need from me. Especially, I know as a recovering people pleaser, I'm trying to guess what people want or need from me. And so that is my goal. And it's impossible for me to succeed. What I'll tell you also for those people pleasers here who are more in that orange or closer to the red zone, this is an expectation we have of ourselves that renews every day. So let's say maybe I had one day where I had actually, wow, magically managed to make all these come true. I made everybody, I pleased everybody to my best ability. I go home, I'm feeling satisfied, I'm being whole, I'm okay. I'm outside people have told me I'm okay. Now I wake up in the morning and I'm at 0 again. I'm not feeling okay. I feel like something's wrong until I start to please and everyone can tell me I'm okay again. This restarts every day. If that sounds exhausting, it is. It is exhausting, and that's why you start to feel more and more tired as the years go on. All right. Let's look at what this type of mindset might play out like at work. So we're going to have these 2 pretend colleagues here. We have Jenny, and she tends to lean towards being a people pleaser at work. And we have Sarah, she's our empowered professional. Now, Jenny is overly accommodating at work. She always says yes if you ask her for any request. My apologies, I'm just going to play. I'm playing with this screen, it's popping around with me. Now, Jenny, she is overly accommodating. No is not an option. So if you make a request of her, you know she'll say yes. Um, because she feels really anxious when she might disappoint someone else. And she rarely looks at her own workload when she is saying yes, meaning she just says yes and hopes and feels like she can do it all later and figure it out later. Whereas Sarah is collaborative and loves being collaborative, especially when it aligns for her. And so she does say yes, but she evaluates that yes, but she evaluates the situation before she says a yes. She looks at her own priorities, at her capacity, and maybe even her values. And if those things align, she is happy to help and be collaborative. She is also able and willing to let someone down if she's evaluated it and those things don't meet her own criteria. Jenny avoids conflict at all costs. And conflict to Jenny can feel like a difficult conversation, even an awkward conversation where there's even the smallest chance where she might disappoint someone can start to feel like conflict in Jenny's mind. And so she avoids and finds that she's not able to stick up for herself, has maybe people who tend to have more toxic traits start to come and interact with her even more often because they know that she won't stick up for herself. And so Jenny starts to have that resentment build up in herself towards others and how she's being treated. On the other hand, Sarah addresses issues early. She handles difficult situations head on because she understands that if she doesn't, that things will fester and typically get worse. So she is able to tolerate some of that uncertainty and discomfort and walking into not knowing how the conversation will go and how it will end. And hope, and even though she's hopeful, she understands that someone might not be happy with her at the very end of that conversation. Now, here's the thing that is really interesting about Sarah. Because she's able to have these kind of conversation and has had them before, she's actually gained more and more skill in understanding how to have difficult conversations. And so dealing and speaking up for herself is becoming easier and easier. It's never 100% uncomfortable. I mean, 100% comfortable, but she's getting better at it. Jenny overworks so that she can prove her value and get praise. The way she can gauge if she's successful at work is because others are praising her, are approving her work, and so she starts to work harder and harder in order to get that approval. Now, of course, what happens is if someone gets used to Jenny working at a certain level, they stop praising her because that's just the norm now. And so Janie comes into work and still needs that external approval to make sure she's okay. And so now she has to up her work and work even harder to now get that approval and praise again. As you can imagine, fatigue starts to build up for her as well as she starts to work harder and harder. Sarah, on the other hand, is able to work sustainably and at a pace at a sustainable pace, and understands and knows her own capacity for work. She has developed a confidence in herself and has an internal gauge for success in her own work and her own satisfaction at work. She deeply understands that rest and work-life balance actually contribute to her success. Jenny tends to seek validation if she has to make a decision. This could be a work decision or a decision that she personally has to make about her own career path or her own a job she's interviewing for. She doesn't have that internal gauge, and so she constantly needs to get other people's approval and opinions in order to make a decision. And if she's having to make a decision at work that will affect others, the idea of being responsible for something that might not be popular is absolutely crippling for her. And so she'll start to really get other people's approval and talk about it nonstop because it's such a difficult thing to move on. Whereas Sarah, on the other hand, she makes decisions quickly and she has that internal gauge of success and her own values and priorities at work and work priorities in general. Now, she might consult someone externally when it's a difficult decision, and she'll take that consultation into advisement. But at the very end of the day, she is the one that's going to take responsibility of making that decision. Lastly, here, Jenny prefers to blend in at work. She has minimum opinions and she doesn't want to say yes or no, especially first, because she never wants to make someone upset or ruffle any feathers or even make someone uncomfortable. So she tends to stay back and just go with the flow of what other people are saying. She's actually often unsure of what her opinion really even is because she defers her preferences to other people so often. Sarah trusts herself and contributes authentically to work. She shares her opinions and ideas for the purpose of growth, brainstorming, and connection. She is not attached to those ideas, however, and can let things go if they don't work for the group. Now, I want to challenge you in where you can grow a little bit, where you see a little bit of Jenny in you or a lot of Jenny, and which way you can start to move towards having a little bit more of an empowered stance at work. I do. Now, at this point also, I want to, before we jump into the tools, I want to ask, are there any comments or questions about how we've defined and talked about people pleasing so far?
There is a question here. It says,
Mm.
how do you see the difference between someone who wants to please someone and codependency?
Well, I'm a coach and not a counselor, so I do want to make that distinction. But the way I see it is that I don't actually think there is a difference because the people pleaser is dependent on the external validation to feel okay and whole. And so there's that codependency that can develop. That being said, also though, this is a little bit from a different model, but people pleasers can also create a dependency with people who will rescue her and save them, and might also have an unhealthy codependency with someone who might be more of a bully um, because of the way that they view themselves. That's a lot to say. If you are interested in knowing more about that, feel free to reach out to me. I go into a lot more depth in a couple workshops I do around this. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, there is another question. Someone said, I am a Jenny, but my question is, can one become a Sarah while still being at the same workspace? And they've been there for 14 years, so they've established themselves in a certain way and they're looking to, become more empowered.
Beautiful question. I think that's I do have to say it tends to be easier going into a new workspace, right? Because in a way, it's not impossible though. But I do see where you're coming from. What happens with someone like Jenny is that we unintentionally sort of train people to have certain expectations with us, and we tend to attract certain people to us as well. I always say that people pleasers typically attract people who want to be pleased, right? An empowered professional is probably going to attract someone who is whole and doesn't need to be pleased. So, to answer that question, yes, it is possible. It's certainly not going to happen overnight, and a slow, steady pace to change is a healthier and probably more realistic way to go anyway. But if you were sort of saying, if you go into work and say, I am no longer a people pleaser and completely change the way you show up, that might be actually harder for yourself and for other people around you. So I recommend sort of a slower pace, and I'm hoping to see how the next couple tools land for you. Any other questions or comments?
There was one more. Someone asks, how do you handle manipulating mannerisms?
Wow. Okay. Great question. Here and this is where when you are in that red zone or orange zone, um, we tend to, like I said, we tend to attract pleaser people who want to be pleased, who might actually be willing to manipulate in order to get what they want. So when you start moving towards this healthier spectrum, I I would say that we start to have healthier boundaries. And when we have start to grow and explore where our boundaries lie, we start to be able to say no and feel that manipulation and come up with strategies to deal with it. Are you going to be completely immune to ever be manipulated or mistreated? No, absolutely not. And you will still have to have those difficult conversations. But as you get closer to the purple part of the spectrum, you're going to put up with it less, right? And so when I've seen people move closer to this healthier spectrum, they're willing to change teams, leave a boss, leave a role because they see that staying means that it's a path towards burnout. It's a long way of saying it. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if I answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. There's a couple more questions, but in terms of time, did you want to answer those in the question and answer
I
portion?
can,
Okay.
absolutely, yes. And I do want to say also, I do run a people pleasing workshop and program. I do speak a lot more about how to deal with those toxic personalities that can come up at work, and how the strategies to deal with that, as you're moving away from Jenny into Sarah. Okay, so let's move into a couple tools now that we've defined people pleasing at work. So we're going to look at the people pleasing cycle. So let's name this beautiful woman here as Carly. Now, Carly experiences a trigger, and this is typically what will start the people pleasing cycle. So, for example, Carly walks into work one morning and her boss is incredibly stressed out. You can see her boss is pacing, is overwhelmed, and automatically, Carly's, I was going to call her Jenny, but Carly's idea is, yes, I'm going to help. I'm going to do whatever is needed. So if her boss now asks, like, Carly, can you please take over this entire assignment? I can't do it. I've got too much happening. The immediate thing is that there's that really uncomfortable feeling of uncertainty in the trigger phase. We say yes, which then results in a momentary relief. It's getting through like a difficult moment, difficult situation. I get approval, I get a relief from maybe it not turning into a conflict. And that's where that first part of the cycle lies, right? But then that relief starts to turn into burnout and resentment because, let's say with Carly, maybe she said yes to an assignment that she's not fully skilled in, or she doesn't understand all the aspects of. Maybe she's also dealing with another deadline that was already in her busy work day. And she's disregarded her own schedule. She's disregarded and not able to evaluate that. So in that immediate reaction, so now she starts to work really, really hard over the few weeks. She's unsure if she's doing a good job. She starts to feel really frazzled as she realizes she doesn't have the full skills to do the work she's agreed to, and now she's falling behind in her own work. She starts to feel like she's drowning. She starts to not take care of herself and starts to notice she's not sleeping well. She's not eating well because she just doesn't have time to put things together. So now her body's not feeling good. And at the end of it, she realizes she's not able to fulfill everything she said yes to. And she finds she's disappointing other people because she's not functioning at her top abilities. And she's also disappointing herself, which feels really, really awful to her. And so at the bottom, she says, never again, never again. I am not doing that again. I have to stop this. Of course, until a new trigger presents itself. Now, if this sounds like a cycle for breaking habits, it is. This is a habit. This is a habit you've learned early on in life, most likely, and something that we react to. We'd probably notice saying yes before we even have a chance to think about it. And Dr. Breaker in her book talks about this actually being quite an addictive cycle. And why is that? If you think about something like slot machines, where you're hitting something and you're not sure what's going to happen next. And most of the time you're going to say it's going to go good, but maybe it's going to go bad. This is where this happens, where we say yes, but we're actually unsure if that's going to be enough this time. We're actually unsure if we're going to not get into conflict. And when we get that relief, it feels like we want to do it again and again, and we get that hit of dopamine, which can feel really addictive. Just drop a yes in this comment if you've experienced the cycle for yourself before when you've been people pleasing. This sounds familiar to you.
Seeing a lot of yeses in the chat right now.
Okay, great. I'm glad that we've found a tool that resonates. Not great that you find yourself in this place. Now, I want to challenge you and tell me in the chat, at which point and between which of these two do you think is the biggest power of interruption? Where do you think you can come in and interrupt the cycle?
Someone says after the trigger.
Yes, perfect. A plus. Right here, in between the trigger and the reaction is typically where we interrupt a habit. Right between the trigger and the saying yes. Now, how do we do that at work? Work feels really scary, especially because it's our way of surviving, and I know that can feel really intense. So I want to let's go into this one. So I want to introduce you to the pause. This is one of the first things, the easiest things you can implement today when you walk away is, well, first, you want to hear and feel what that trigger is like for you. What stress comes up for you when a request comes at you? What are you feeling in your body? And you need to know that so that you understand that that's the trigger. And that's when you can start to ask for a pause. Right now, the pause I encourage you to look for is time. I want you to win yourself a little bit of time before saying yes. So that could sound like if it's a request, it could sound like something like, let me know, let me get back to you this afternoon to let you know if I can do that. Let me go and check my capacity and get back to you tomorrow. Or, you know what, I'm working on a few priorities right now. When do you need to know the answer by? So by creating that space of a few hours, 10 minutes, an hour a day, that allows you to now get a little bit of breathing space to see if you can or should say yes, or if this should be a no for you. This is the way you start to interrupt that immediate yes, yes, yes reaction. Now, as you practice this more and more, that pause, that space actually is internal. And you will find that that trigger starts to lessen and that space becomes internal. So you're not just reacting to that uncomfortable feeling, but you're able to make a decision rather than a reaction in the moment. Now, during this pause, and this is in the workbook for you as well, during this pause, I want you to ask yourself these three questions. Question number one, what is motivating my yes? If I feel a strong pull towards saying yes, what is motivating that? Am I wanting to say yes because I'm actually wanting to contribute in this moment? I want to build this new skill. Or am I just scared of disappointing someone? Not just, that's a big deal, but is that why I want to say yes? Question number two, if I say yes to this, what am I actually saying no to? Because every yes means a no to something else. Am I saying no to focus on a priority I'm currently working on? Am I saying no to going home on time for the rest of this week? Or am I just saying no to a peace of mind? Now, you might still decide to go ahead and say yes, but I want you to do this now with as a decision and understanding what you're giving up in that moment. And last question I want you to consider is, will this yes still feel good tomorrow? So when I wake up tomorrow, am I going to say, yes, I'm so glad I say yes to this opportunity. I'm glad I can support my team. I'm glad I can collaborate in this way. Or are you more likely to wake up feeling overwhelmed, resentful, and like that feeling of drowning again? Now, if you've had a pause, if you've answered these questions and you still, you know you should say no, and you're still struggling with it, I'm going to give you three more questions to reflect on. Again, this is in the workbook. I encourage you to look at the workbook, and there's space for you to actually answer these for yourself as well. Now, if you know that you should say no and you're still really struggling to say no, ask yourself this: would I give someone else permission to say no here? Am I trying to control an outcome? Am I trying to make sure I don't get fired? Am I trying to make sure my boss still likes me and they're not going to be upset with me in this moment? And then the last question is, how can I handle this moment of uncertainty to someone's reaction? As people pleasers, let me phrase this as myself. As a people pleaser, I remember thinking I was absolutely 100% sure exactly that I knew exactly how someone's reaction was going to be if I said no. I knew for sure they were going to be disappointed with me. They're going to consider me a non-team player. I was going to, all these things. As I came out of that cycle and learned to create boundaries, and I learned how to say no without saying no, and I have a resource for that too, if that's something you're interested in, I was shocked by how well people reacted to it and how much they trusted my yes. So, something to consider. Now, that's the one tool. I want to talk to you about the cycle again, and I want to talk to you about a deeper way to truly start to deconstruct this cycle for yourself. And that is by dealing with the trigger. Now, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. This is something you might need a little additional support with, whether that be through professional conversation with a counselor or with even with a friend, a coach. This might be a little bit deeper, but this is where we start to really take this model apart, understanding what is triggering you to feel such a need and such a fear of disappointing other people. Now, I do also have a tool for you I want to go through to start to work on your mindset to maybe lessen this trigger. I know that people, even on that purple part of the spectrum, still might feel a little nervous about saying no in certain situations. It's just not that red, intense, all-consuming trigger that I experienced when I was a people pleaser. So let's talk about how to change our mind frame around this. And this is the reframe from a should to a could. I'll ask you in the comments below, what does it feel like if I say you should really volunteer for this additional project at work? What does that feel like in your body? You should do that. Let me know in the comments.
There's pressure, anxiety. Someone asked what the question was again.
Yes, I'm asking what it feels like in your body when I say you should volunteer for this additional project at work. Pressure.
Guilt.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I switch that now to you could volunteer for this work, you could. Does that change anything in your body?
It feels optional, empowered.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
You have a
Absolutely. This
choice.
is where,
Yeah.
yes, this is where it becomes that choice. And so you might choose to still take on a big project that maybe will push you a bit and maybe will challenge your time restrictions, but you do that as an option. You see the could in it. You see the reasons why you want to say yes rather than the fear of saying no. And as a people pleaser, I know, and Dr. Breaker talks about how we live in this should space. Really, the should. So today, I want to go through some of those people pleasing mindsets that we talked about in the beginning of this presentation and how we can start to reframe them into a could instead. In the workbook, you'll find a section for each of the shoulds that I pulled out from Dr. Breaker's book, and how you can start to reframe them. Let's go through a few though. So this should, I should always do what others expect of me. Now could sound like I could help others when it aligns with my values, capacity, and priorities. Now, listen, this is how my could sounds. I have to say, all of you will have a different could that feels more like you and feels better for you. So if my could doesn't quite land, that just means that the wording isn't quite right, or your could might sound like something else. Let's look at a few more. I should take care of everyone around me, whether they ask me to or not. We're going to switch that to I could care for others while trusting them to handle their own needs. All right, we're kind of going low on time, but I just want to maybe have a couple more, and I want to give you a moment to try it. I'll give you one more example. I should always be nice and never hurt anyone's feelings. I could be kind and honest, even when truth creates discomfort for others. I do have to speak to this for a moment as someone I'm a trained leadership coach, and this is something we had to really train as coaches. This idea that another person is fully capable and competent and able to handle discomfort. As a people pleaser, that's something I didn't trust. I almost would want to handle the discomfort for them in a way, rather than let them even feel a slight moment of discomfort. And then actually stepping into the power of other people and understanding that someone else is actually quite powerful and capable. All right. I will maybe just for one or two comments, how would you flip this should to a could for yourself? I should always put others before me. What would your could sound like? Let me know if this feels more like a struggle and I can.
Someone says, I could consider others' needs if it's okay with mine. I
Oh, beautiful.
support
Oh,
others
go ahead.
of the capacity. Yeah.
Exactly. Beautiful. And I could include myself in the circle of people I care for. I felt really empowered to me as well. Okay, so we are here at 12:50. So just to wrap up what we've gone through, and then I want to take your questions and comments. And we've gone through definition of people pleasing. We've looked at what the mindset of a people pleaser in that red zone might look like. We've looked at the spectrum of people pleasing and where you might fall in there. And we've looked at what people pleasing might sound like at work in comparison to what someone on an empowered part of the spectrum might sound like. Um, And I've shown you two ways to start to intercept that habit of people pleasing. And I invite you to really view it as a habit and not that you're sort of at the whim of it. You are powerful and you are capable. And just like breaking a habit can feel really challenging in the beginning, this is a habit that you are fully capable of breaking slowly, surely over time. So just to wrap up, um, just to open it up with them, some comments and questions. I'm going to use this square, circle, triangle method that I heard about. Let's see if it works for us today. So square, what are you squared away on? What have you agreed with and feel that you fully understand? What do you agree with? What part of the definition today felt really strong to you?
Someone said, what is motivating my yes? That this is a habit I can break and change, taking a pause.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm so glad. Those were strategies that I myself used moving away from people pleasing, and I still continue to use after Thanksgiving weekend. The pause with my beautiful mother came in so helpful because I still, that's one relationship I still struggle with. So I'm so glad that that some of you finding that really helpful. Let's try the circle. What's something that's circling your head? What are some questions, curiosities, uncertainties? Oh, I think I spelled that wrong. I also invite, I'm really curious if someone really disagrees with some of the definitions or how it plays out. I'd love to hear from you as well.
There's fears of others' reactions to my boundaries.
Yeah.
How can I explain myself in a way that is calm and respectful? What can serve as a reminder to catch yourself in people pleasing? And that I don't want
Mm,
to be confrontational.
yes. All right. Well, let's see if we can go one at a time. Can you start with the first one again, Carissa?
Yeah, for sure. Someone says, what can serve as a reminder to catch yourself when you're people pleasing?
Beautiful. This what helped me a lot is starting off when you think of the cycle, um, start to review it. At the end of the day, you might say, okay, I know I people please today, and start to review and think for yourself, when did it start? What was the trigger? What really made that reaction happen? I bet you'll notice that it's especially hard for you to stop with a certain person or a certain situation. And so that could be a reminder, a trigger, and a practice ground to just say, okay, in this one situation, I tend to people please. What can I do differently? What I like to do is actually play back. So in my mind, in a hypothetical world, what could I have done differently? How would I have, what could have been something I said? And play around with that first before stepping in and just going, blah, I'm not people pleasing today, which I found really hard at first. So think about the times that you know you people please, the people that are just really trigger that in you. And as a coach, I will tell you the power of post-it notes by your computer is just amazing. It can really help with a quote or something because it's a habit. You might not notice it happens until 3 hours later. What was the next question?
Yeah, the other one was, so how do you become not a people pleaser, and while you're afraid of confrontation?
Beautiful. This is a big answer. We dove into people pleasing in a short period today, and this is a longer path, absolutely. But one of what I like to think about the path of non-people pleasing is to start to step into your wholeness, to start to step into who you actually are and understanding A, why you're people pleasing, B, where are your boundaries? And yes, a few of the pauses and the yeses and interrupting that is going to start to lead you in that direction. But really, it's a longer, deeper path that I really invite you on. It's absolutely beautiful where you're empowered and in trust for yourself, and others are collaborators, rather than these people on the outside that are feel dangerous. Let me know if that answered your question or not. What's another
There was
question?
another one that said they have a fear of others' reactions to their boundaries.
Absolutely. Now, again, this is yes, a really big one. And what I will say about that, again, this comes up in I have a long workshop around boundaries to address this. But I want to talk about the difference between aggression versus assertiveness, and being aggressive and saying, stop, don't you dare, step on my boundary, versus saying, you know what, I don't know if that's going to work for me. Let's try something else instead. Or can we explore a different way of doing that? So there's that, the way you find your language in that moment. It doesn't necessarily have to be that aggressive, you better never step on my boundary again, which is what we think. We should always just say no. But there can be a softer way that you still define that space for yourself. Also, I want to invite you to think of it as you don't have just this one opportunity to set a boundary. It's not one and done. You can try again, and you can try it differently, and you can change that boundary and make it stronger or weaker as you see fit, especially as you're starting off in this.
For sure. Someone said that the link for your website for the next masterclass doesn't work, so maybe you could plop that link in the chat, or you could send it to me and put
Absolutely.
it in the
Yes.
follow-up, just so they
Great.
want to
I
check it
think
out.
that's because I just changed the date. So my apologies. I will have that up by the end of today. So I will send that out to Carissa. Would that be okay if I email that to you by the end of today or tomorrow, and you could send it out to the group?
For sure.
Thank you.
Someone
Great.
else asked, how are people-pleasing tendencies linked to imposter syndrome and do they feed into each other?
It can. They can. Would probably I would say it sort of depends, because I think at the end of the day, the trigger we have around our people pleasing might be very different. So imposter syndrome might look very different. So I'm going to guess that for some people, the people pleasing aspect and imposter syndrome feel really strong, especially if they have a need to have that constant approval or invitation, or constantly being shown that they do belong. And if they find themselves in a space where they don't get that, that can feel like they're in an imposter space. But also, I think imposter syndrome can feel like something else separately. So again, because I'm not a counselor, I'm hesitating to link those very strongly together at this point. I'm curious if how you would see it, or how others see it. Maybe I'll put it to the group. Do you feel that imposter syndrome and people pleasing are linked strongly?